Hi, I'm Laurie Garrett-Cobbina. I am the Associate Professor of Pastoral Care and Education here at the Graduate School of Theology for the University of Redlands. I'm also the Director of the Shaw Chaplaincy Institute. I've talked to you previously about COVID-19 being a traumatic event. It's a trauma in the sense that is causing a crisis of meaning for all of us. And a loose definition of trauma is a crisis of meaning. And added to the grief and the trauma and the loss of life due to COVID is the crisis presented by systemic racism. The trauma of racism, which has added this layer of being both contemporary and transgenerational, it presents not only emotional shock that has an enduring effect, but it also overwhelms the normative way of coping with repetitive tragedy. It also encompasses a crisis of meaning that presents a concern over continued threats to life, continued threats to the body, to the emotion, to spiritual well-being. So we really have two pandemics right now that have really become present. Of course, the COVID pandemic, but also systemic racism you can see as a pandemic. So the experience of trauma and grief, as I've said, is intellectual, it's spiritual, as well as emotional and physical. So all these areas of the being are affected. In spiritual care, as we work not only to lessen the distress in the lives of trauma survivors, we also are committed to creating a world that contains less trauma and trauma distress. So I've talked about phase one of trauma care, which is the immediate spiritual care to the traumatic event itself. And that focuses on restoring physical safety as well as establishing and working through numbness and denial, confusion, anger, nightmares, tears, and cognitive cloudiness. And we work through this by offering clarity, listening with an open heart, and staying connected even though you may feel uncomfortable or you may have feelings how difficult it is to engage this level of pain and also to hear the truth of another person's experience. So I've called this the ongoing, going into the wilderness of the soul with others. Today I'm going to talk a bit more in detail about spiritual care response, working with people in the second phase of trauma care. In phase two, people begin to feel their feelings. However, part of the challenge that we face is that safety, especially safety for vulnerable populations, has not been established. So then the ongoing experience of trauma, such as traumatic racism, becomes truly untenable. You can expect expressions of anger and blame for survivors, and you might see shame from those who are advantaged in a system that systematizes racism, but also advantages people in terms of response to COVID-19. What you can expect in attending to the spiritual recovery and using the spiritual dimension of life as a resource for resiliency is to companion survivors, reach out to survivors of trauma, offer empathy and co-journey with them, create times of rest, of relaxation, of respect, which can also include things like ritual, prayer, and also play is very important. So this is the phase where you have to hear the story. You have to hear the story, no matter how painful it is for you personally to hear that story. This is a meaning-making time in phase two, a time to create a narrative of restoration, narratives of liberation, narratives of sustaining life, and narratives of transformation. So these are the opportunities we have in phase two, because we want to help people create narratives that have a spirituality of hope embedded in it. This is a time to walk with survivors as they construct new interpretations of their lived experience and what is possible to transform their lives and transform all of society so that it's possible to not only sustain life, that is, get to a place of safety, but thrive together. The overall goal is to increase the capacity for emotional expression, that is, empathy, so that we can better engage with suffering. I hope this was helpful. In phase 3, I'll talk about the long-term work that goes with um, responding to the spiritual care needs. It's complicated and complex because really we want to return to normalcy now, but for some people, normalcy is tremendously threatening to life. So you'll see this desire to return to normalcy, and you'll see the challenges of that in a society that is inherently hostile to certain bodies. So this is really, the third phase is really important because that's when we talk about the need to transform all of society and sort of this vision of hope, especially comes through the spiritual life of transforming the world so that it is a healing place for everyone. So I hope you look forward to the last phase 3, and thank you for being here today.